no matter what interest you have, whether it's watches or zips on your jackets, like you can start a podcast on that. There's someone somewhere in the world who's gonna be listening to you talking about zips or whatever. So in today's episode, I have Matthew, and Matthew is quite an interesting character. He's a podcast host of a podcast called Impulse, which is also about medical technology. He brings some fascinating CEOs there. There's a lot of things that I learned on that podcast. So if anyone is listening to this right now, go check out that podcast. It's really interesting. But today we're basically co-hosting together, and we're just going to be asking each other questions. So yeah, Matthew, would you like to also introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Rodney. It's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for your message. Initially, we connected over LinkedIn, so the way we connected. Actually, maybe that's interesting. Funny anecdote. So I was preparing the last episode I released with Joe Landolina, and I was like looking at other episodes or podcasts just to see what he had done before, and I saw that he recorded one with you, so I just listened to it and said to kind of understand a bit more in detail what he was up to. So that was the way it kind of really helped me to prepare my episode, and that's how we got connected. So it's a pleasure to be here. And about me, so I'm Mathieu. I'm a biomedical engineer by training. I'm French. I live in Switzerland now. And I've been doing my podcast for close to 2 years. I started in February 2022. And it's been a fun, it's not my official job. I do that outside of my job, kind of as a hobby. And it's been very fun so far. We will talk about it, I guess, but it's been very interesting from the people I've got to meet, the topics I've got to learn about. So there's definitely a lot of stuff in medical technology in general. I think you focus more on med tech, so medical devices and so on. So very happy to be here, and thanks for your invite.
Nice. That's good. So I'll just rewind a little bit back to also introduce myself for the guys who listen to Matthew's podcast, Impulse. My name is Rodney Moses. I'm from Zimbabwe, but I grew up in South Africa, went to school here. I went to university here in the UK, and I've basically been living in the UK for about just more than 6 years. But in total, I've been in the UK for more than 7 years in my life. And I started this podcast not so long ago. I started it in April this year, April 2023. Just since we're going into 2024 soon, it's important to start saying the date as the year is 2023. And it's been a journey. I've met some really interesting people, so that's basically kind of a quick background to me. And I'm also a biomedical engineer, but I've worked in R&D basically my entire career. As Matthew said, we or the podcast is like a little side hustle that we run after work, after long hours and everything, and we get to just come here and meet people. And I'm interested. You said you met you spoke with Joe Landolina. He's quite an interesting guy. The things he's been able to do and achieve is quite great, and I'm happy the podcast episode I done with him was helpful for you.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked him. It's one of the episodes that I've done where when I got the invite to have him on my episode or my podcast, I thought it was a scam at first because because my podcast hadn't been running for as long, and an email from one of his, I think is either his secretary or one of his peer team members saying, "Oh, can Joe come on your podcast?" And I was like, "Wow, okay." Then I was like, so I had to prepare for that quickly, and now here we are. So it's good. It's good to meet you this way, and that's the nice thing about the podcast, right? You get to meet new people. So that's
for sure.
Really good.
Yeah, it creates a lot of links between people. So I think that's also a very positive aspect. But and also what you said, I think it's the best recognition you can have when you have people come to you after some time where because initially you just reach out to people and you have to convince them, especially when you don't have any episodes out and you don't have any background in that sort of space. I mean, in the podcast, not in medtech, obviously. It's very rewarding, and I guess it's kind of things where it pushes you to continue because it's more
True.
like a marathon.
True. Yeah. So yeah, then we're gonna get started with the sort of like the questions we're gonna be asking each other. So the first question is so tell us about your podcast and why did you start doing it, and what do you cover? And by the way, these are questions that Matthew sent me. I'm just basically reading Matthew's own questions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, but so from my end, so the podcast I run, the full name is called Impulse Meeting Healthcare Pioneers. So the initial idea, I had it because I think I started listening to podcasts in maybe 2019, maybe like heavily. And I was mostly listening to long format conversations, one-on-one, like a bit what Tim Ferriss is doing, what Joe Rogan is doing. But not only like US guys, but also like, a lot of French guys doing that as well.
Yeah.
But very similar type of, conversations. And I know at some point it struck me like there was not so many people who were. I think it was also like before Andrew Huberman started his own shows, where
Yeah.
I think I'm not comparing myself to him, but it's like he it was before that he created that, or at least at the very beginning, and I had the impression like we are lacking a bit, the people who work in the medical space because they obviously do like almost magical things. And I had, in mind a few people that from, let's say, my close ecosystem that I knew could be potentially very good, guests, or could be, very interesting people to talk to.
Nice.
And so I kind of like started to think about, okay, what, if I would launch a podcast, what would be a bit the concept, what would be the name, what would be the topic? And the initial idea was really to say, okay, could we, democratize in a way medical technology with people who are pioneering that field, who are working on incredible technologies that are actually really changing lives of people. And yeah, that's how it started. I got like, let's say the rough concept together. I started reaching out to a few people, and that's how it got started, really. What I cover is basically I try to. It's not like only like you mentioned CEOs and so on. Of course there's a majority of I think entrepreneurs and people in the industry that I receive, but I also want to give the voice to researchers and also like doctors or physicians. Because in the end, it's not like it's kind of like the whole scope of those sort of profiles and stakeholders that make the change happen. And I'm not like a startup guy. Like I mean, I work with startups for my job, but I'm not an entrepreneur, so I don't also want to convey I don't necessarily want to the message I'm trying to convey through the episode is not about, hey, you should start your own business in medical technology. That's not the case. It's more like to say, okay, I think that this is an interesting topic. Let's talk about how it works. What's the problem it solves? What are the current what's the current stage of the technology? Is it available? Is it going to be available soon? And yeah, make it in a way that it's in an interesting conversation, not necessarily intended for people with a technical background or with an engineering background like us who are more informed on the topic, let's say. And that's how it started. And now I think I'm like around 25 episodes published.
Yeah,
I try to have like kind of like a monthly frequency, because
nice.
that it takes a lot of time, and and you have to do it on the long run.
True, and definitely, because you don't want to get bent, like sort of like bent out, with this. It's easy to get bent out, so it's like we'll come back to that in a bit. But like I'm really fascinated with why you started your podcast, because when I look at why I started my podcast, which is not there's some similarities that we share there, and it's also a journey of going through like it's like paradigm shift in your mind, because essentially, as you said, as we trained as it's engineers and university, like when you go to engineering school, it's hard on facts, it's empirical facts, it's, this and that. It's not anything to do with what we're doing right now with, having a podcast, because a podcast is more like something to do with media. So, like, just a quick question
Yeah.
before, like, like I answer as to why I started mine, but like, how did you find that change from going from, like, having a engineering background and, being informed and everything, to try to create something that's sort of like working, essentially doing a media outlet where you're trying to simplify things for people? Like, how did you find that difference?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question because I think in the way I went about it when I kind of like started the show, I really approached it like in a bit from an engineering perspective. So I wanted to have, the process well. I wanted to, have the workflow well set up, preparing the episodes very like well, or, documenting myself hours and hours before, before I had like the first episode with Ted. So it was very much, academic in the process. And over time, you kind of like also start to trust yourself that you can, lead those conversations in a meaningful way, and you don't have to overthink a bit how you want the episode to run, because there's also like a bit of a, in the end, you also don't know where the conversation is going to go. And that's also actually the purpose of it. And if you're just like stuck about, okay, I have the questions prepared, I share them with the guest, I don't want to deviate by a single bit from what I wanted to ask. I think it turns out more to be like an interview than like a proper conversation. And I think it's detrimental. And I think that the listeners like feel it. So, yeah, but I think it's an interesting, I think it also serves to in many different areas, in my life, in my professional life, I'm not someone who, let's say, speaks a lot, from, let's say, my personality and the way I behave. So it was also like a big stretch, let's say, in the first episodes. And I was very, very stressed, every time I had those conversations. And now I approach them from a very, very different angle.
No, that's really good, and I'm happy to hear about that. Career growth, or not just career growth, but sort of like personal development growth, essentially, from starting this podcast. And for me, like, the story was as to why I started my podcast, or to talk about my podcast. My podcast is MedTech 101, or 101, depending on
Yeah.
or 101, depending on where you're from. It's basically, the aim of the podcast was to, also, like as you say, to look at some of the latest technology we have, or some of the technology we have already existing in the market, um, and try to basically explain why, or maybe how it works, or bring the CEOs, behind those companies, and basically have them talk about their new products as well. So, but at the same time, my podcast is also an outlet for me, because what I've been doing for a very long time, because it's like since I was 15 years old, I knew that I wanted to do biomedical engineering. So most of my interests have basically been, heavily invested in this sector, just knowing what's happening, knowing about the new technology, at least for the last, 10 years. So this has also ended up making me become a little bit philosophical in some senses, especially for the podcast that I do by myself, because I also run solo episodes, and those solo episodes are
Yeah.
basically based off my essays. So what I do is, before all this started, I used to just basically tell my friends about it and stuff, and I was like to myself, I could start a podcast and just basically, convert my essays into scripts, which I then just release and people can just listen to, and just to
Yeah.
get a wider audience and see where it goes. I didn't expect it to go anyway, so I was like, the first six episodes were just
It's
literally
like you
just
have
me
nothing to
talking.
lose,
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. The first six episodes is just basically me looking at, like, questions that I've been asking myself, like, why a medical device is expensive. As I myself, I grew up in South Africa, in Zimbabwe. I was asking myself, what could we do to increase medical devices, in these particular countries? And I sort of like look at things that have been tried and things that have failed, and what solutions could potentially come to that. Because my approach to life is, don't be the person who always brings a problem. Like, if you see a problem, also bring a solution with it. So think of a solution in the
Mm.
process. So that's been my sort of like, attitude towards life. But for me, it was also the reason why it also then pushed me to start the podcast was because I think up until that point last year, October, when I decided to start a podcast, it took me 6 months before I released the first episode, which was this year in April.
Yeah.
And it was a stage where I was like to myself, okay, I've been working for some big companies. At that time, I was working for Johnson and Johnson, and prior to that, I was working for a company called Parksman, where I had teamed up with a few other people, and and we sort of like co-invented a new medical device, and the patent was published last year. So in my head, I was like, okay, cool. I've been contributing to some new medical devices that are basically being newly invented into the world. I'm working for some
Yeah.
big companies, but I also want to start something that's sort of like something that I'm sort of like in charge of, like an outlet for myself to express myself, to basically create something for myself entirely. So besides a new device again, so there's a new challenge. So therefore, that's how the podcast came about. And the first podcast I went on as a guest, and this was like last year in February. There was a lady, like a nice lady. She invited me on her podcast, and which was just basically talking about we're just talking about some of the things that I faced in my life to get to this point. Because you can imagine, for me, like where I grew up, people didn't even know about medical devices, and I made
Yeah.
the decision to actually come to Europe to sort of like pursue this career, or to get
Yeah.
started
No,
in this
that's huge.
career at least. So I packed my bags, I came here. I didn't have any family, and I would only go home once a year, kind of thing. And I was just looking at it today that for the last 7 years, I have not spent Christmas at home, with my family since 2016 until like now. So I've been away for Christmas every year.
Yeah.
So just to try to get this career going. So it's like so the lady enjoyed the story. So I went on a podcast, and I was so nervous when I listened to myself when I was talking there. I was so nervous, but after a year, I was like, you know what? Like I did this last year. Maybe I could start, like my own as well. So that's basically like the summary as to why I started the podcast. And yeah, so those are the topics we cover. Like there's some solo episodes, some CEOs coming on there, and I also do co-hosted like episodes like what I'm doing right now. And I also even I've even also started reaching out to like influencers on like
Yeah.
Instagram, people who have pages that have a lot of following within this space. I also get them on the podcast so they can also share what they talk about. And yeah, and I've been releasing. Well, my plan was to release once every week, and then like take a month break,
Yeah.
like after 3 months or something like that, but obviously, because I took a break and I also have been dealing with some other things, I literally have I'm starting to get a backlog of things that have been recorded but they've not been released. So
Yeah.
I just want to say to people listening right now, don't worry, like the content is coming, it's there. I just need to clean it up a little bit and I'll release it. But so that I just want to make sure that it's edited and stuff in a way that makes it also quite enjoyable to listen to. So yeah.
Yeah. No, that's impressive. And like I mean, I don't know if you like when you said like I want to release one per week. I think it's very admirable. Like it's really like I assume you do everything on your own, right? So you don't
Yes.
have anyone like supporting you with just like the processing and so on. And it takes, I don't know, for me, I guess for one episode, from the time I just reach out to a guest to the time, to when you have the recording, the post processing, the communication, like takes you probably like 8 to 10 hours for
Yes.
one episode. So it's a huge amount of time.
And that's time after work. That's eight
Yeah,
hours, eight
exactly.
to
So
10 hours
that's
after
time that you
work.
take outside of work. And I mean, even if I would, like, I don't think I also have like all the, let's say I could put even more rigor, but then I also want to save, rest of my free time for other stuff as well. But I really admire the people, even the professional ones that, that are able to release one episode per week, because yeah, it's so much effort, so much
Yeah.
time, and there's a lot of uncertainty because the people you contact, you don't know their agendas, you don't know how, so they have like to continuously like fuel the backlog and so on. It's very impressive.
Exactly. And adding on to that, actually, I don't know if you do the same, but do you have a YouTube channel for your podcast?
So I used to have one where I was just like putting the episode with like an image of basically but it was static, and because I don't publish like the videos, because I took the decision not to, because I don't have the time to
Makes
process
sense.
the videos.
Yeah,
Yeah.
makes sense for me. So me as well. So I was trying to do that and also release the YouTube videos. So I published the videos. So I also learned how to edit like videos. So not only did I become a podcaster, but I also felt like, okay, I'm becoming like a YouTuber essentially, because now I have to, make certain videos, put certain voices on top of it besides the audio alone. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting journey, when you and especially when you start getting messages from people. Some people will be like, oh, because what I do from the YouTube videos, I also have an Instagram page and a TikTok page where I take like extracts, maybe that are
Yeah.
1 minute long. I see you do the same thing on your podcast and you put yours on Spotify. But what I do, I take those extracts, put them on TikTok, to reach a wider audience and stuff like that. And sometimes I've had a lot of like, fan mail, people telling me, they like what I'm doing. But there's also been cases where I've had people send me messages saying that they don't agree with what I'm saying and everything like that. And I'm like, I'm not even 6 months in, and I'm already getting a bit of, hate mail from some people, and it's always something that's funny. But I always reply to in a very polite way. So to try to express exactly what I was trying to say in that particular moment when I say that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's and because of that, I've had to actually, for the graphics, like for infographics for the summary episodes that I do, I've had to get one of my friends to help me with the infographics. So I got so right now two other people. One just does the infographics. I think if you go on our Instagram page, or TikTok page, you'll see there's some infographics summarizing some solo episodes I do, and basically that's one of my mates that I've got onto the team, where she just listens to the episode and she summarizes it in like quick infographics, and then we also release that as well. But I've only been keeping that on Instagram and TikTok. The reels, I put them on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. So I try to keep it sort of like, balanced, but it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, and I feel like I've sacrificed quite a lot of social time in the process.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, but with yours, like those are some really exciting episodes that you have there about, some really interesting stuff. Like how, like, because I think I know what makes your podcast different from the rest, but I want you to say it before I add on my own opinions and why I think yours is a bit different from the rest that's out there.
Yeah, so I think the difference is the different points. So I think the first thing is that it really starts with the way when I think about potential episodes, I think about a technology or a topic, and I think about, okay, who could be a good person to talk about it, and it's very centered on that technology. Like, it's not about. I mean, there are some components of the conversations that are a bit around the background of the person, because I always ask them to present themselves. But it's not like these inspirational conversations about the achievements of someone. It's more about,
Yes.
there is a little bit of that, but the emphasis is more on, okay, we want to talk about that technology. How does that work? What does it mean for people? When will we benefit from it? What are the limits? Kind of like unveiling, because many of them are also like presented in more general public media, and it always talk about the very shiny things, and it can actually lead you to think about things that are not true, or that are kind of like deform a bit what the reality is. So yeah, it's really about conveying that the how those new technologies work. And one thing that I also like kind of like realized while I was doing it was, I think in the end, there's a lot of things that happen in the world that are, not so nice when you look at the news. Like, it's like,
Yes.
it can really affect you. And me, what I found in like medical technology and some of the progress being made there, like it really gives me a lot of hope. So, and that's also what I try to convey through the conversations that I have. And yeah, maybe also what brings, and that's the feedback I got many times from the people who joined the show, and I always have like those conversations, maybe like you have after the recordings, and ask for feedback, and they always tell me, yeah, like I really like we can feel that you've put some thought into the questions, and that you are also like knowledgeable about the topic. And I mean, maybe that's related to what I study, maybe that's related to the field in which I work, but it's not that I'm also like trying to approach a topic that is really far away from what I normally know, which could also be fine, but I think it has an added value. And so yeah, that would be my answer. But I would also be curious to hear about your thoughts on what makes it different, because there's obviously like more and more people starting their own shows, especially
Sure.
like in healthcare, and it can be hard to differentiate itself.
Of course. Yeah, I mean, like it's interesting what you say there because like people don't understand how difficult sort of like, med tech or biomedical engineering is because essentially we are different from other traditional types of engineering, which will be mostly inclined towards one type of science, for instance. So let's say if we're doing aerospace engineering, we know we'll be depending on what we've done, maybe to be maybe heavily focused on maybe materials or fluid dynamics, which is mostly chemistry and physics. If you did civil engineering, it's mostly of course maybe the chemistry and maybe so that you make sure that you get the mixture correct and also physics. But there's very few types of engineering that take a biological component into that, and that's biomedical engineering. So biomedical engineering is basically you have to have an understanding of a good understanding of biology, chemistry, physics as well. And also on top of that, you have to have a good understanding of computer science. So I feel like biomedical engineering is like basically a baby of all four of these. So it's like
Yeah,
you have to have a solid understanding, and that's what makes it quite different from other types of engineering. So that's why it's even niche. You don't really get a lot of people doing it. It's hard to come across and say something. So when you know something like a topic which you've actually done research on leading up to that podcast, like what you said, it takes a lot of time. Well, not sometimes, yes, sometimes maybe no, because depending on what you already know, but we have to educate ourselves as well sometimes because the technologies can be so different even though it's in the same sector. Like because one might be focused on a different part of the body treating a different kind of illness, so you have to understand the illness first and then you have to understand what the actual devices are trying to work to do to help that illness. So for me, I think adding on to what you said, what really makes mine maybe a bit different from what I've seen out there is I'm probably one of the few guys putting these solo episodes out. Like I'm just me writing, releasing my essays,
yeah,
on what I think, and most people don't do that. I know it's quite scary to do that. So I do both. I release solo episodes, and
yeah,
the reason why I started releasing solo episodes, maybe I have to give this person a shout out, is because I was listening to a podcast by Alex Hormozy. I don't know if you know Alex Hormozy. He
no,
base he basically is this guy. He does, and it's not even about medical technology. He's just talking about business, like his thoughts and
mm,
stuff. So, and I'm like, most of the time I'm having these thoughts anyway, and I'm writing my own essays and keeping them in my own computer as a hobby. What about if I just start releasing this to the public as of it, like in a format that's like a 23 minutes? So when you see a 23-minute episode, that's like 4,000 words that have gone into writing that essay to get to turn it into a script essentially. So I guess that touch of me being, having interviews, co-hosting episodes, and also running solo episodes. I think that's what makes mine different because it's
yeah,
scary. It's scary to talk by yourself into the microphone for like 20 minutes nonstop. You're just talking to a microphone, and then it comes with maybe some people might like it, other people might not like it, and you have to keep people captured because I think that's why most podcasts have like two people talking. You usually have like two co-hosts, and that kind of helps
yeah,
because you've got alternating voices. But if it's just one person talking nonstop, it's like you have to alternate your voice by yourself, to keep people hooked. It's like it's I don't know, some make it sound bad, but like you have to keep people's attention hooked because attention is there's so many things fighting, for people's attention nowadays, and you have to actually go and change your voice in such a way that keeps people in tune with what you're trying to say. So I guess that's what makes mine different. I still have to meet another podcast, I think, who's running solo, but I haven't seen anyone doing solo episodes.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen it. So many others doing that as well. I mean, and the person you just mentioned, I don't know that person. So yeah, and I guess it's very, it takes a lot of courage to do that, because yeah, you also have to make abstraction that, potentially people, like, I don't know, at the beginning when I started my show, I was also like, asking myself, hey, well, am I actually like legit to ask people to spend time with me to talk about those topics that they're experts about, and I more like a generalist? So yeah, it's definitely super courageous, and it's very cool that you're doing that.
Yeah, it's just I just felt like at first when I was doing it, I was like, okay, what I did, maybe I might as well say it now. But the first 6 episodes I released, so literally the first 6 weeks, I last year in October I created the Instagram page for the podcast. I didn't tell anyone about it, and I started releasing episodes without telling anyone about it. So literally, it's just me recording. I'm releasing episodes every week. I'm not telling anyone because I'm like scared. I'm like, if I tell people, they're gonna think I'm crazy. I'm just asking myself questions and saying, okay, why are medical devices expensive? And I spend like 20 minutes talking about why medical devices are expensive, and I look at all the things that have been done. So that's how I overcome that fear. So it's not like I was born, with ice in my veins or anything like that. No, it's once you start doing it and you realize, okay, it's not as bad. You kind of get comfortable in your own skin, and then you end up just, topics like essay topics that I have. Like so, before I started the podcast, I didn't know that I would end up getting guests. So I'd basically 40 essays ready. So I was like, okay, I can run my podcast for 40 weeks. So I got 40 essays,
That's
solo
a lot, yeah.
episodes. Yeah, so I got 40 solo episodes that are gonna be coming on this podcast. So I know there's 7 out right now. There's like still 33 more. And how I get the ideas is like sometimes I'm just in the shower and like an idea for a podcast comes. They come in waves, right? And then I just write down on my notepad. And I don't know if I can quickly show you here, but just give me a second. This will be funny. I'll just show you something quickly because like literally, I don't know if for people, maybe some people might not be able to see, but it's because of the screen. But literally, I've got like on my notepad, on my phone, I got
That's cool.
40. I got 40 episodes that I'm gonna run solo waiting for me. So even if I don't get guests, I just come back to this list and I know, okay, cool, it's time to release that essay, and yeah, that's how I do it.
Ah, that's cool. That's cool, and it's actually quite
Thanks.
smart in the way that you're also not fully dependent on availability of potential guests. So
Yeah, yeah. So all the delays that happen will probably be because maybe I've been traveling a lot, or I've been away, or I'm probably sick, or something like that. Since I don't have a team that helps me with editing, the team that I'm starting to build now is mostly to do with market penetration, like like digital marketing,
yeah.
infographics designer, things like that. So that's what I'm doing. But for the actual hardcore stuff, it's still mostly me by myself. So yeah, and I know, like, looking at the time, we don't want to spend the whole night, but it's like, what episodes would you recommend people to come to and listen to on your podcast?
Yeah, so there, trying to think. I think there is one that I really like, or at least when I recorded, I think I really enjoyed the conversation. I mean, I enjoyed all of them, but the topic was very particular, and I think it speaks to a lot of people. So that's episode 6 that was recorded with a lady called Jocelyn Bloch. She's a neurosurgeon working in Lausanne, and she's working with quite renowned professor at EPFL. So that's a school that the university I studied at. And both of them are working on new therapies for people who are, who cannot walk anymore. So they had a spinal cord injury. And so they developed some, kind of implant that they put on the spinal cord, and they're able to, very schematically make the nerve terminations grow again, and they're able to regain some level of control over their gait. So that's very incredible because, in the past you would say, okay, you have a paraplegic person, that person's in a wheelchair, like there's no way the person can stand, take a few steps again. And so they're really changing that. And they created a startup called Onward, also based in Switzerland, where they are basically aiming to commercialize the technology. And it also has like a lot of other applications where you can also reestablish blood pressure balance for people with those conditions as well. Recently, they got featured in the BBC as well because they use the same technology to stop tremor in like for Parkinson's disease patients. So the range of applications is actually huge, and the effect that it has on the people is incredible. So, and she explains everything about that. They also couple that with electrocorticograms, so like picking up signals from the brain directly, putting into the transmitters, and basically the patients were able to regain autonomous controls. Normally they would have some kind of interface like a phone or something to control their gait, but in that way they were able to create a sort of like closed loop circuit where upon your own wheel you can trigger a step or something. So it really goes in an incredible direction. I guess it also touches on to what some companies like the one from Elon Musk's Neuralink is trying to do, or Synchron. So these brain computer interfaces. So it's a very interesting one, and she's an incredibly humble person.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's the one I guess I would recommend to start
Nice.
with.
It's funny you say that because the next essay or the next solo episode, which I'm actually in the process of writing right now, is how medical technology has basically helped people overcome, physical limitations. And it's interesting, like like where we're going now with not just the connecting the brain to our devices and external machines, that neurological machine relationship, but also like exoskeletons that are being developed, and by exoskeletons I'm talking about devices that maybe might help you lift things that would probably been heavier and stuff,
Yeah,
even though that has probably had maybe more military applications, but that's also still helpful for
yeah.
older people and things like that. So it's fascinating. I'm definitely gonna listen to that. So before
Yeah,
before I
there's
release this.
like actually
Yeah,
episode 3 that I
yeah,
recorded. So one of the very early ones that was exactly about that. Was with the CEO
exactly.
from a company
Yeah.
called Flies. Mm.
Nice, nice. So I'll listen. I'll listen to all those while I watch them at the end of my essay, so I can just see where what gaps I've left, and if I steal anything, I'll reference you. I always reference people who I've taken information from,
Oh,
and
that's very cool.
that's one thing I like about writing essays for the podcast, because I add the references in below, like after the timestamp in the comment section of where I've gotten certain information. If someone wants to read some more information, they can always find it there. But I like it because I get flexibility to change an essay into sort of like a conversation outside of like academic writing, because academic writing is quite rigid in terms of the structure of
Of
how it is
course,
to
yeah.
be. So
Mhm.
so when I get to do this, I'm basically exploring things that potentially could have been maybe written and research into a paper, but making it sort of like informal and casual. And I get, got a sort of flexible template in terms of how I want to bring it across. So yeah, no, that's good. I'm gonna listen to all those episodes you mentioned, and I also recommend everyone listening to this to also go check them out. And but then for me, it's I don't know. I'm kind of conflicted when I think about which one would be the favorite episode I've done, because the styles are different. So one thing that I also started doing recently, which I didn't do before, was to touch on social issues, because one of the CEO that I brought a few weeks ago, Samantha Moore was basically talking about, like women in medtech. So we did an episode talking about women in medtech, and, the some challenges women face at work, decisions they have to make, when they decide to start a family, time away
Yeah.
from work and everything. Which for me, it was like, a stretch out of initially my comfort zone, because initially I was like, I'm not going to touch politics. Not to say that I don't have political opinion, but I thought, okay, let me not ruffle the wrong feathers. But I thought that one was quite like key having that, so for people who want to hear about social issues and how maybe certain things can be done to help them, then I recommend that episode. If you like, if you don't mind the sound of my voice, then you can check out the solo episodes. You can choose out of the episodes I've recorded there, and it's some really cool technology out there. You can just check out some of the CEOs I've brought in on, because I think every CEO that I've brought on has some sort of like quite unique technology. But just like you as well, Matthew, I also started with the people that were in my circle. So the first CEOs were people that I kind of knew, and then it started expanding to to CEOs I'm meeting for the first time on the podcast. So yeah, and I'll let you ask the next question, Matthew.
Sure. I was thinking,
Yeah.
there's obviously like a lot of things that you learn about, and there's like a progression curve, when you start releasing the first episodes, and you get kind of like into the job of running a podcast. So I wanted to ask you, what's been maybe the biggest lesson you learned since you started your own show?
Um, that's quite interesting, actually. I would say the first lesson you learn is to overcome like self-doubt before anything. They say, because I like looking at it right now, it took me 6 months to release the first episode. But then it only took me 7 days to release the second episode. So it's like went from 6 months to release one, and then 7 days to release the other one. So it's like, and then if I realized if I could do this full time, I'm sure if I was really hammering it, taking Red Bulls every single day, I think I could do maybe 2 episodes a week or something. But
Yeah.
I think so. Overcoming that self doubt, just being comfortable, you're like in areas you're passionate about. Because I feel like the world we live in right now, we've got this what they call these urban tribes, or sort of like internet tribes or urban tribes. And this basically means that no matter what interest you have, whether it's watches or zips on your jackets, like you can start a podcast on that. There's someone somewhere in the world who's gonna be listening to you talking about zips or whatever. So you just have to find your own urban tribe, and that's the beauty of the internet, the leverage that you have. So no matter what interest you have, because I meet so many people, right, with so many keen interests, whether it's cosmetics, they know so much about chemicals, ingredients. They need to go into lotions, but they just feel like they're not in a place to talk. And when you come on the podcast, you're not talking as an expert. You're just basically sharing your own thoughts. So that's the type of like podcast you could have in terms of whether it's entertaining or informative. But these types of podcasts we do are informative. So, but I feel like everyone somewhere has got a particular interest, and you can make a podcast out of that. And the last thing I'll say, just a quick summary, what I learned as well is that like it's nothing is easy, but if you don't do it, but everyone, you gotta start somewhere. So you gotta be willing to be a fool to be a master, right? They say every oak tree started as a seed. So, and not to say this because I'm being motivational or anything, but I'm just saying that you have to be willing to be a fool to grow. So if and it's always funny right now when I go back and I listen to episode 1, and I'm like, oh my god, I think I sounded scared there. I was like, nervous. And I listened to how I've sort of like evolved over the episodes to now where I've like done episode 23, which I'm gonna have to still release, and this is now what, maybe episode 24. And yeah, so it's like you have to be willing to be humble, to be a fool, for you to get to the point where you're actually as good. So that's excuse me, that's what I would say. And yeah, I would also ask you the same thing, Matthew, in terms of what have you learned so far?
Yes, I think with the I really agree with most of the like all of the points you mentioned, and especially the helping you being uncomfortable with like in uncomfortable situations where basically you have someone in front of you, and you have to you basically have 1 hour. You have to entertain a conversation with that person by also making it valuable for her or him. and you're not an expert on the topic that you are going to talk about, and you want people to be interested, but you also what you want to kind of like foster in terms of exchange and conversation. So that's one. I think the second was I really had that sort of like imposter syndrome when I was reaching out to people and saying, hey, I'm starting this thing. Would you like to give me? In the end, they give you the most precious thing that they have. They give you time. And I was really not sure, if people would respond positively, if they would just tell me, okay, what's the audience? How many people listen to this thing? You have to convince me. And I never, like so far, I never had to convince anyone. It was, people always, regardless of the kind of like, the beat, someone with an early stage company without, such a huge community or very, very known figures, they've always responded. And either they told me, I just simply can't at the moment. So there were like three, kind of like three categories. You have a no, I can't or I don't want to, but at least you have a response. You have a cannot at the moment, maybe in 3 months, and the others were like a plain yes. And in 90% of the cases, it was the latter. So it was like a yes. And when I was reaching out to those people and also having those conversations with these people, you also deconstruct a bit who they are, because you can make yourself an image of who they are and how they are based on the public communications that are around them, or the way the company or the research group or the NGO they work in is communicating. And usually it's very different, and you learn, you meet a not very different person that you're kind of like your mind or that the media has created. I think it's that's to me like but that's to me the biggest learning is like people are so willing to share, like, it's really nice. Like, it's kind of like the kindness in those people that are so busy, and you ask them time, and they straight away tell you, yeah, let's go for it. And they don't ask for anything. Like, I don't pay the guest of my show. I don't do that for money. And it's very nice. And it's definitely like one of the biggest positive aspects from doing that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you, and it's like it's something that happens, and you feel like it's good. And when you're doing that in the first stages, and when people start asking you to be on your podcast, then it's like, wow, okay, people are actually looking at this. Someone is listening, and then I don't know. Do you also monitor the stats of your podcast to see which episodes have done well, which ones have maybe not done so well, or like your reach and stuff, and then you sort of wonder why this one was particularly more popular than the other?
Yeah, I don't really look so much. Like, I keep an oversight on like the numbers, but
Yeah.
like, to be honest, it's moderate audiences. We're not talking about millions of people.
Yes.
But to me, it would not make so much sense to, or at least if you look at the downloads and then this is your basis for evaluating whether the episode performed or not.
Yeah.
I think it's a bit limiting because of course the topics are going to differ from one episode to another.
True.
The communities potentially that the guests have differs. So I don't really make so many comparisons. I think the approach that I always try to kind of like improve on is how I communicate about the episodes, also how I run the episodes as well. But I only use, you mentioned that you were using basically all of the different social medias. I only rely on LinkedIn, also due to the fact that I don't do any videos, and yes. I also want rather to focus my time and my efforts on that platform where I think there's actually most of the listenership that I have and the listeners. So yeah, I don't. So I don't. Let's say I'm not super strict on making those comparisons and trying to compare different episodes that potentially perform quote unquote differently.
Yeah, that's definitely a good way to do it, because even when I started, as I said, I did the first 6 episodes, and I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell my personal friends about it. I didn't tell my parents about it, or And I was just releasing right by myself and saying, okay, whoever listens to it or bumps into it by accident, then they can listen. It's fine, because it's not about the numbers. If I really wanted the numbers, I would have maybe started maybe marketing it months in advance and everything, do those market campaigns and stuff. And the reason I personally started on TikTok was because I understood that there's some people out there who don't have time to sit down for like an hour or half an hour and listen. But I thought, okay, maybe these people, like similar to what you do with your extract, those people whose short attention spans, they probably should also have something for them. Because we live in a world where we got these people. So you got two communities: people who can listen for long, people who can't listen for long. So I was like, okay, the best way to reach the people who can't really listen to the podcast for long is by TikTok, and maybe putting some more videos. They're making it very interactive, and some people have really learned a lot from that. So I've got some people learning about medical technology on TikTok, which is, I thought, okay, that's cool. But I never had TikTok until I started this podcast. So I literally got TikTok for the sake of trying to reach that younger audience, because it tends to be younger people. And the goal was maybe to try to convince them to get on, like like knowledge about the industry, maybe perhaps even go to university and consider biomedical engineering as a degree or as a career. So yeah. And one funny thing that one of my friends told me was, I don't know if you noticed this as well, is when you start a podcast and you talk to people essentially maybe for the first time on camera, where you have to make it as interactive as possible. My friend asked me
Yeah.
if this basically had sort of like improved my own personal life or my own dating life, because it makes you a better communicator. So I was like, I don't know if maybe it is improved my my personal relationships or dating life, is what other people might want to say. But I'm not saying this to people that start a podcast to improve that part of your life, but I'm saying it goes elsewhere at work. When you're talking to other people, it's like you get to learn to also to listen as well and absorb some of that information. So yeah. And I think,
Of course, yeah.
yeah, what I don't know what you think about that last point, Matthew, but
So about so about the dating part, I don't know.
yeah.
About the improving your communication skills and driving conversations, also like being comfortable, having a discussion with someone you just met. I think it really helps. And I don't know for you, but like for me, I'm more like an introverted person, so
Yes.
it takes a lot of energy normally for me to engage in a conversation,
Yes.
and so on. And that really helped me, I think. And at work, outside of work,
Yeah.
when I meet new people, it really helped me. So it's also like, I think, a good skill to develop. And when you do a podcast, I think you in every case develop it, because you don't have the choice. And you kind of like learn the hard way at the beginning, or depending on where you start, maybe you have some people here like hearing us that are extroverted people, and
Yes.
they by default they are very comfortable in having those conversations. So
Yes.
but you can always, I guess, progress. And it's I think it's definitely something a benefit you withdraw from doing that.
True. No, that's definitely true. I agree with you. I agree with you. And yeah, and then like looking at the time and everything, just one last question. In terms of like, how can people contact you, Matthew? I know you mentioned LinkedIn. What's your LinkedIn name? But I'm also gonna attach your link below as well, so people can find your podcast. People can find you in LinkedIn and reach out to you to maybe come on your show, or maybe some actual advice you can even give them about the career.
Yeah.
Because I've had people asking
Yeah.
me
So,
about the job, like, and I'm thinking, okay, I've just run a podcast here, but I'm not like a career development expert. So, but yeah, so like, where can people reach you?
yeah. So LinkedIn, as you said, that's the only social media I actually have. I also run, so there's the podcast website where you can follow the activities. That's impulsepodcast.com. And the name for the LinkedIn account, that's Matthew Chaffard. So Mathieu, and Chaffard is Chaffard.
True.
So you can just add me, mentioning that you listen to the episode and you want to reach out, and I'm always happy to accept and have a chat. I try to respond to all the messages.
Yes.
but yeah, that would be that. There is also like a newsletter that I started. I don't know if you do that actually, but I started that a few months ago. That's also around the podcast. Like it's a way to share with the listeners the new episodes coming up, but also more generally talk about what's happening currently in medical technology, what's kind of like in the cartons for the future,
Okay.
and also some anecdotes from, like, let's say, past major achievements, like for example when was the first vaccine established, this kind of thing. So, and it's more like to develop also like those writing skills. I think it's a different exercise as well than running the conversation. So yeah, this is I mean, you find the newsletter on the website. It's hosted on Substack, and I think it's called the Impulse newsletter.
Sure.
So yeah.
Nice, nice. And just a quick question. Did you mention the guy who started with the vaccines, was it in France, right? So it was a French guy recently with the measles and
I
what is
think
it?
it's not. I believe I
Yeah.
thought so, but
Yeah.
it's. I think it's a British guy.
All right, all
It's a
right.
British guy, and that was for the cow. Like, yeah, that was for the
Cowpox or something.
smallpox.
Yes.
Yeah,
With the
exactly.
maidens and stuff like that. And they did that on a little boy. I think, yeah, the story as to how vaccines came through. So
Exactly.
nice. And yeah, so basically, guys, those are the contact details for Matthew, and I'm also gonna be adding those below here. For me personally, actually, one thing I was going to ask you was, how did you create a website for your podcast? Because right now, the podcast website that I have was basically the one that was generated by my podcast host, like Buzzsprout. So it's quite basic, and I really wanted
Yeah.
to, start leveling up on that so that it's easier for people to contact me there and everything. I can also start actually maybe publishing my essays, because right now, even though I write all these essays and stuff, I don't really have a platform to put them onto, that I turn into episodes, other than
Yeah.
TikTok and Instagram, where I summarize them as, infographics, but that's very, compact. So how did you get your website going?
Yeah, so I used like a simple website creator. I used Wix.
Nice.
That's the one I used, and it's a fairly, like, I could dig up what template initially I used, but in the end it was like very customized. So I really tweaked a lot of stuff there. Um, but I think there is also, like, I could send you after the recording, maybe, because I don't have the name of it.
Okay.
But I heard of a very good, so like, platform where it's really made, like, it's a website creator just for podcasts,
Yes.
and you actually just input, like, the RSS feed,
Nice.
and it creates you like a very nice page.
Wow.
So if you don't want to spend too much time doing that,
Yeah.
because I actually spend quite some hours
Of course.
figuring out the sort of structure for mine. And this can, I mean, depending on what you want to achieve, it can, you can get in a lot of time. So I'm happy to share that with you afterwards. I
Sure.
just don't have the name on top of my head.
All right. So yeah, and my contacts are okay. So on Twitter, it's medtech underscore 101, which is
On
also
X.
the on X. Yes, correct. It's not Twitter anymore. Yeah, and on Instagram, it's also medtech underscore 101. Which is the same on Facebook. On if you want to find the video of this on YouTube, the channel is called MedTech 101 by or with Rodney Moses, and same thing on LinkedIn. If you just search my name, Rodney Moses, you'll find it there. And on TikTok, the handle is MedTech 101 podcast, because someone took medtech underscore 101. I wanted to keep the handle the same, and I was like, nah, I'm not gonna.
Interesting.
I'm like, someone beat me to it on TikTok, so I was there. I was late to the game, so it's medtech 101 in numerical formats, and podcast after that. Then you can find it there. If you also want to see some of the things we've done in the past in short clips and short videos, it's available for you to see there. And yeah, so that's basically my contact details. But I really enjoyed having this conversation with you today, Matthew.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Ronnie. It was fun, and it's cool to have those conversations with fellow podcasters in the field. It's very nice. Like, it would not have happened if we had not started that. So
Of
that's
course,
very cool.
of course. So yeah, we just definitely we'll just to continue sort of like giving these companies and people in this industry a digital platform to just, like sort of like digital marketing platform, really, which does not really involve a lot of cost for them, and it's also an opportunity for people to actually also understand who they are. So yeah, I'm really happy we spoke today, and I was looking forward to doing this for a very long time. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Rodney. Take care.